I was going to mention that there's no Dunsparce in the list, so the Raikou V will also be wreaking havoc on Tord if Grant can pull that off consistently. So we'll get this game started, and I did also notice that second Energy Recycler for Grant in the prize cards, and we did see that card almost costing him in the previous match that we streamed him at, so we'll have to see if that factors into this game, but seems like Tord will be leading us off, and with that beautiful double Arceus discard from the Ultra Ball, can't really ask for much more. Going first, Lugia active, 2 Arceus in the discard pile, you really don't need much else.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. You can't draw it up any better. To have the Arceus already in Archeops already in hand, you just discard those immediately. Get to see some additional resources, and we will see the strategy of choice here from Tord now. Do you go for that second Lugia and value the consistency, or maybe do you go for one of your favorite cards there in that Raikou and try to work in some nice draws to have a really clean turn too?
Indeed, all of those are really good options, but Tord opting to go for the Lugia VSTAR, probably knowing previously that there's a very little to no chance of his hands getting Marnie throughout the game, maybe not even Roxanne, and that wouldn't even factor in Grant's turn number 1, so guaranteeing that Lugia VSTAR, Tord's really not missing anything from his setup. Is there even a universe where he can keep his bench low enough where Raikou can take a KO past that V-Guard energy? I think there might be a chance.
We see Tord eyeing up that Stoutland V moving up into the front of the search there. Just checking in to see if that is going to be available. Double Dip Fangs can certainly be a very strong attack in a matchup like this. So many low hit point basic Pokemon in this deck, and with the advantage of using those powerful energies and a multitude of them, of course, could be taking multiple prize cards.
Yeah, that Stoutland V could be very problematic for Grant. I was talking to him earlier, and he did say that any Lugia deck that does play Stoutland can be very problematic. He does have some answers to it, but they're not perfect, and that is the one card that he'd rather not be staring down right now.
Well, not going to have to see it just yet, as the second Lugia is grabbed off of the capture energy.
Yeah, so delaying that Stoutland a little bit. Perhaps Grant doesn't necessarily know, but changing his mind, going for that Oranguru.
Yeah, I definitely see merit to this play. Just establishing the Primate Wisdom as early as you can lets you see a lot of cards, and it also helps you make sure that you're setting up exactly what you're looking for on the following turn. Perhaps some of these special energy cards that you don't always want to see, you can get those placed on the top of the deck. And if there ever is any shuffle that happens, you have an opportunity to see that later when you're looking through the deck with Archeops.
Now, of course, the energies are a lot more useful in the deck than in the discard pile for Tord. So putting those energies back, and he is holding a Quick Ball, so at some point that could end up being very clutch to make sure that he's attaching the right energies at the right time with Archeops.
All right, it is go time for Grant Manley. Going to start things off here with the Battle VIP Pass. Multiple Pokemon likely to be searched out here. Have to think that cards like the Radiant Greninja, the Comfey are big targets here, liking drawing as many cards as possible, but also starting to load up that Lost Zone.
Indeed, he'll want to get those flower selecting as soon as possible. That Radiant Greninja will give him access to even more cards, so that will be pretty useful. I think the biggest hurdle for Grant to go through is, can you find those Colress's Experiment quick enough? He doesn't have Luminion V, he doesn't have any sort of Pokegear to try and dig through the deck. If he doesn't find one in his starting hand, then it's all down to concealed cards and flower selecting.
Yep, on stream previously, Grant had a whirl of a time trying to get the Comfey to listen, as it was not selecting the right flowers. Let's just say that. A lot of terrible choices that had to be made there, and hopefully Comfey is feeling a little more generous in the holiday season, looking to find a Colress's Experiment soon. And there it is, at least with the Radiant Greninja's help.
Yeah, certainly Radiant Greninja and Comfey making a very good pairing. We do see the Colress Experiment fetching another Colress Experiment, so really good. And we did see Grant having some really awkward flower selectings in the previous time that he did get streamed. However, I think he navigated them perfectly. He knew exactly which cards to pick. He did have to think through the choices very carefully, but he ended up winning pretty convincingly the game. So I think he's very aware of those tough choices. He knows his deck perfectly, and he knows how to navigate those situations.
Definitely, Grant has been in this situation many a time, having to make difficult decisions. Comfy gonna make this one maybe a little easier. Seeing the choice belt and the battle VIP pass. Generally, when you see the battle VIP pass, it's turn 2 or 3, and you're just throwing it away. We do see some Pokemon down, and you start to wonder if you need a couple more here to keep this strong turn.
Seems like Grant values the choice belt a little more. Definitely wants to pump that damage from Raikou potentially, maybe the Cramorant hitting into the Lugia eventually as well, or even dealing with the Stoutland at some point. So very, what a choice, right? To have to send a Battle VIP pass on turn 1 in the Lost Zone when it's essentially the most important card you want.
Yeah, I feel like I've done this a lot when I'm playing the Lost Box deck. Comfy and all of the other Pokemon that you draw into, eventually you just see so many of these basic Pokemon, and you don't feel the need to play them down on your bench. You want to leave some bench spaces open. Don't want to overextend into issues with your opponent starting to deal extra damage. Of course, it's not exactly going to be happening from this side from Tord, but you like to have your surprises, and if you can draw into those and keep them in your hand as opposed to being forced to place them on your bench with the Battle VIP pass, then you're left with that element of surprise, which may be able to catch Tord a little off guard.
Oh, most certainly, though I don't think you could catch Tord off guard at this point. He's in top 4. This is his comfort zone, it feels like. And at this level of play, I think catching someone off guard is going to be very, very difficult. But Grant continuing to get cards into the Lost Zone. We'll have to see where he's at after this. And if he manages to not KO the Oranguru, but will ping it with the Spit, innocently setting up for a future Sableye play, potentially knocking out Menafee and that Oranguru at some point.
Yeah, that's a very strong line of play here. Don't necessarily need to knock out the Oranguru at this stage. Can't even do it anyways, but to get this damage down in place, that just leaves opportunities for Grant to take these prize cards later on down the road. 4 in the Lost Zone means that Sableye could be online in the next 2 turns or so. We've seen it happen a little earlier sometimes with him reaching that 10 card mark in 2 turns, but it certainly can happen with this list.
Now, something very peculiar about Grant's play the previous turn, he did bench that Manaphy, playing it extra safe in case of a Raikou, but Tord does not, in fact, play that Raikou. So that really shows how, despite being down so many rounds, despite Tord arguably being one of the most watched players probably at the event, you can't always know, and that also shows the level of preparation and thought that goes through Grant's mind. He's trying to compensate for every possible little thing that could give Tord an advantage.
Yeah, it could be argued that this Manaphy is a liability at this stage. The Stoutland V would love to only need 2 powerful energies to get the job done here and knock out one of those Pokemon for 2 prize cards.
And speaking of, there's this Stoutland V threatening the double dip Fangs. It will take a lot to knock out this Cramorant. It will require an investment of 4 powerful energies, but with Tord's knowledge of the deck, he might be comfortable doing that purely because a response onto a Stoutland is not easy to do, and we see the first 2 powerful energies getting powered up right here.
Yeah, that's right. The Summoning Star from the Lugia VSTAR bringing these Archeops into play that were discarded on the first turn of the game. Now we see the Primal Turbos available to start to look for these special energy cards, and I see at least 2 of them now here for the Stoutland V, and that could really mean anything at this point. We haven't seen the supporter of choice for Tord. We also haven't seen the retreat available, so still a few decisions left to be had.
Ooh, Tord putting back that powerful energy, is holding the double turbo to attach to Oranguru. So now he will use that second Archeops, get those extra powerful energies onto the Stoutland. So very properly sequenced by Tord, very clean play we are seeing from him. And honestly, he couldn't ask for a better setup at this point.
Yeah, the double dip Fangs with the assistance of the plus 80 damage from the powerful energy is going to be enough for a knockout on the active Pokemon here for 2 prize cards. And as you were saying, the 210 hit points, that's pretty beefy.
Indeed, especially for a deck such as Grant's that relies on Kyogre to be the big damage dealer and leads off with Cramorant or even Sableye or Radiant Greninja with that little bit of chip damage setting up future KOs here and there. But how does Grant deal with this Stoutland? Is Raikou a possibility? With the other Colress that he was able to keep from the initial Colress, he could end up activating that Mirage Gate and taking a return KO that way.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Grant has the cards available. With the Mirage Gate in the Lost Zone, you have to think that certainly the reach could be there. But this turn is all about toward Reklev. Some excellent sequencing as we saw that powerful energy available due to the Oranguru. And now with this nice big hand from the professor's research, has plenty of options as he goes in for this double prize knockout with the double dip fangs.
Yeah, that double prize knockout could be very key here. Of course, Grant relies on having an advantage by using single prize attackers, but double dip fangs compensates for that disadvantage that Tord might have had. And now the next issue comes down to if Raikou is the response here onto Stoutland. Will Stoutland trade it pretty evenly, right? 2 prizes for 2 prizes, and then it's on Tord to knock out the Raikou and take another 2 prizes. So it does apply a lot of pressure to Grant, and there aren't a lot of great targets for the Kyogre to clean up the game for Grant. So we'll have to see if he can factor and compensate for the Stoutland at this given time.
Yeah, the pressure that this Stoutland brings and requiring this response so early, it just means that Grant is going to likely have to leave those 2 prize cards of the Raikou V left for Tord, which should be fairly easy to clean up at this point of the game. And Grant would rather play a little bit of a slower game. He wants to allow single prize knockouts, buy a lot of time, use these cards like the Sableye, start to spread some damage around, and then you can set up this really clean knockout with the Kyogre, and it doesn't look like he's going to have enough time to set up anything like that, and that's not a spot you want to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. This Stoutland is very threatening, and this is another of those cards that had never seen any sort of play before Lugia appeared in the metagame, and all of a sudden it's about to take toward Reklev into the finals potentially. So really interesting how these brand new cards really get the most potential out of these older cards.
Well, looks like we have plenty of cards in the Lost Zone here for Grant, up to 8 now. So certainly Mirage Gate activated, a little bit off for the Sableye, but may not be what we're thinking about at this stage. Have to remove this Stoutland V from play, or else that's going to be 2 more prize cards very easily for Tord.
And Grant, if his response ends up being Raikou, then Tord could respond with Lugia, and the Ordinary Rod that Grant had to send to the Lost Zone unfortunately would make it very difficult for Raikou V to be able to get a return KO on the Lugia as well. And if that was the response, then Tord would only be required to take out that final Raikou to close out the game. So Grant in the backseat, he'll have to figure out a different way to respond to the Lugia if he wants to win this match. But we don't see Manaphy out yet for Tord, so either it's impeccable timing or he won't be able to access it from his prize cards, and the Kyogre will wreak havoc here as well.
Well, here comes the Mirage Gate, as this is going to start allowing some of these energies to be accelerated onto these Pokemon here. Going to be a beneficiary as another energy goes to the Raikou. Have to be thinking that the Lightning energy is already in the hand here to have the opportunity to attack with this Raikou V. Also, can't forget about the Fleet-Footed to draw an additional card when it reaches the active, and I think we're just a couple bench spaces off from a knockout here. Oh, Choice Belt, that helps too.
Yeah, with that Choice Belt, Raikou is now dealing, I believe, 190. It might be 210 exactly.
Yeah, it's a plus 20 effect, so you just act like there's an additional. So this should be the 210 for the knockout here.
Right. Yeah, it's the 8 bench Pokemon plus the base 20. But
let's add a few more.
Makes it easier for us. Just decides to bench everything up and takes that KO on the Raikou. Tor does need to double check the math, just making sure that we're all good here. And Grant eliminates that Stoutland from play. So how does Tor respond to this? He does have the possibility to take down that Raikou very cleanly with the Lugia attack. He could also end up using Radiant Charizard at some point, but I feel like if you establish the Lugia and you establish the Radiant Charizard on the bench, then he'll be able to deal with anything that Grant throws at him.
Yeah, I think making use of the high hit points that you currently have has been a strategy that's been very strong for Tord, especially knowing some of that information, as you were mentioning earlier, with that Ordinary Rod. So the Lugia VSTAR does start to make sense. There is merit to starting to make use of your single prize Pokemon, but at any case, if you want to knock out this Lugia VSTAR, it's probably going to have to be a Raikou once more.
Yeah, there's no other way for Grant to deal that big damage other than the Kyogre, but given how early we are in this game, how many cards Grant has left in his deck, pulling off that Kyogre seems basically impossible at this stage. So how could he deal with this? And if he takes that risk, I mean, his only option might be to go for the Raikou, right? And if he doesn't use the Raikou, he ends up losing the game. And if he ends up using the Raikou, he might still lose the game, but there's no better way.
Yeah, this isn't sounding ideal here, and this hasn't been exactly the strongest setup for Grant. Even though he's been able to do what he wants, he's been looking and drawing all these cards. He found the Colress's experiment, and he's had the answer to these Pokemon that Tord's bringing. They just don't align very well with the strategy, and it's because of the pressure that the Stoutland put on. Just too many prize cards were going to be available, and Grant had to bring out this answer earlier than he wanted.
Indeed, this Raikou is a very good card against Lugia, but when you're going second, when you're behind, when that Stoutland has already gotten that very favorable price trade-off, the Raikou might not actually be enough. But I don't see what other Pokemon Grant could have used. He could definitely not afford to give up 2 more prizes to the Stoutland, and there was no purpose, nothing to set up at that point for him. So we'll have to see. Maybe a Gusting play could have been good to trap something in the active. That's not possible because the Arceus just attaches energies everywhere. I'm sure Tord's aware of that, and Grant doesn't even have any Boss's orders, so we'll have to see what he's planning, because even though we have extra time in this match, and in Top Cut rather, you have to know that Grant's deck is a little bit on the slower side of things to close out games because of the lower damage output from his Pokemon.
Yeah, Grant typically winning games because of the damage that's left on board, and right now just a little bit of damage on the Oranguru, not really going to be beneficial here. We do see the Marnie here from Tord going to fill the hand up to 5 now and leave Grant on a 4-card hand, and you have to think that Tord is hoping that this is enough to avoid a retaliation on this Lugia, as we do not see the Dunsparce currently.
Yeah, no Dunsparce for Tord. There isn't one in his deck. Oh, there is one, sorry. That's my bad. So that could be used to protect the Lugia from the Raikou, but Grant needs to stretch so much, needs the Ordinary Rod, another Quick Ball, or potentially a Capture Energy, and another Mirage Gate to be able to take this KO, that it's going to be really, really difficult to pull off.
Yeah, I think there's almost merit for Tord, even if he had the Dunsparce, just not to play it, because the Sableye could just knock out that and the Oranguru, and then maybe these 2 prize cards from the Lugia could be found on a later turn. So completely understandable here from Tord to just say, yeah, if you have it, you have it, and even then I could just find Radiant Charizard and close things out.
Yeah, and even though, like, if you go into this matchup knowing that you're up against Kyogre and that there's a Raikou, as you mentioned, like, you might be eager to bench those cards, but they can also be a liability. So it's very important to evaluate at what point you bench those cards, at what point you play them, and how valuable they actually are for you at any given point.
All right, looking at Grant's hand, we do see the Pokestop, which could be used to look and see some additional cards. Also comes with a little bit of a liability, as you're only able to grab the item cards off of the spin. And we do see plenty of the Mirage Gate in hand along with the Kyogre, but it's not a Pokemon that you need to be thinking about at this juncture. Only 2 energies left in the deck besides that Capture Energy that's hiding back there, and that doesn't mean that Kyogre's ready to go in at any time soon.
Yeah, definitely not. The deck still has a lot of cards that do not benefit the Kyogre. It is forced to discard energies in order to maximize its damage potential. And Grant is very close to being able to attack with Sableye. If the Lost Zone counter is at 9 right now, then he still needs one more to be able to attack with Sableye. You'd imagine knocking out the Oranguru is one of his available plays, but then what's the other play? What's the follow-up? Where does he place the damage? And how does he prevent Tord from taking 2 more prize cards in his next couple of turns?
Yeah, you'd think that maybe the rest of the damage would just try to work its way onto an Archeops and a Lugia to a point that maybe a Kyogre could do something, but you're asking so much of your deck. You need the Energy Recycler to be very generous to pull off that big attack there, and Tord is going to keep you on a clock.
Yeah, there's also no Color's Experiment so far for Grant this turn, making it hard to thin the deck as much as he would like to. Getting, I believe, Lost Vacuum and Hisuian Heavy Ball off of that. Flower selecting, no switching card available for him just yet for that second Comfey. Does have energy to retreat, I believe, that capture energy, so should be able to get into the Sableye, but we see the Scoop Up Net instead.
Yep, Sableye ready to work its magic here. Lost Zone has 12. That means the Lost Mine is certainly activated, as it only requires 10. But you do get to place 12 damage counters. Oranguru at least going to accept a few of those, and it looks like the rest will be placed on this Lugia VSTAR. So a potential to set up for a 3-prize knockout, as we do see some damage also to the Archeops. It's there, I suppose. It's a lot to ask of your deck, though.
Now, if I do recall correctly, the mana fee was at the 3rd and 4th price spot, and I do see it right there. So with the impeccable timing that we were talking about in the beginning of the game, Tord will be able to bench that mana fee, putting the Kyogre out of commission at least for 1 turn. And you have to imagine, if Tord takes a KO on this Sableye and is able to set up some sort of other attacker, then he'll be able to close out this game, even with potentially an Arceus, because Grant's Pokemon do not have a lot of HP.
Yeah, the Speedwing will be enough to close out on many of these Pokemon here, even just having the energy down so that you could retreat to one of the stronger attackers. If for whatever reason a Raikou was able to come back into play, would be a strong choice here.
Yeah, Tord still has the Radiant Charizard to respond to that Raikou, has Arceus to respond to a follow-up Sableye, but Grant needs a big attack to deal with this Lugia, presumably this Radiant Charizard, which begs the question, why thin specifically the capture energy? That is a way you can get that Radiant Charizard out of the deck, sorry. So, I don't know, maybe he is holding a Quick Ball, so he can also fetch it that way. I feel like Tord would really benefit from getting it out right now, establishing the threat and telling Grant, hey, I have 2 attackers, I'm down to 1 prize card. No matter which one you take out, I can close out the game with this.
That's a great point. The capture energy often just seen as a colorless effect at this point, just something to retreat with, an energy that you just throw onto a bunch of Lugia at once when you're trying to preserve your powerful energies. But in this case, it would actually be a pretty welcome top deck later on. So I do love that mention there as we see the knockout from the Lugia V-Star. And that will take Tord down to just 1 prize card remaining. Grant needing to have the turn of his life. And that is a nice find with the Energy Recycler.
That is indeed a nice find. Maybe there's something to do here, putting energies back, powering up your Pokemon, but without the Ordinary Rod to recover the Raikou, I don't see how Grant can pull this off, and he finds the Ordinary Rod off of the Flower Selecting. So if Tord didn't have a way to get the Radiant Charizard or didn't have an Aurora Energy available, because there are 3 in play, then perhaps Grant can run with this game.
We are going to see the Clara assisting as well in this strategy. The Raikou is going to be a choice, as it has the most hit points, could hopefully assist in staying around for 1 more turn here.
Yeah, with that Clara, Grant did not need that Ordinary Rod, so I got a little bit excited for no reason. But there's the Raikou, will be able to at least potentially replenish the deck if he needed energies in order to power up through Mirage Gate. The residual damage from the Sableye will make it so that Raikou doesn't need a lot of basic Pokemon down or bench Pokemon from either player to take the knockout on this Lugia. And it will come down to, can Tord find boss plus power up the Archeops to KO one of those Comphase or the Manaphy on the bench, or
the whole deck is gone here. The Energy Recycler is going to fill the deck all the way up, and we are going to see the Mirage Gate. As it makes you wonder if the Kyogre was almost a reachable play, but of course the Manaphy really shut that down.
Yeah, looks like Kyogre was reachable, but Tord finding the Manaphy out of the prize cards at the perfect time. Otherwise, Grant might have been able to take those last 3 prize cards here.
Yep, Tord robbing us of what we all wanted to see for the benefit of potentially winning a top 4 game.
Now we do see the Archeops promoted, the Luminion fetching that boss's orders. You have to assume being able to knock out whilst powering up with Primal Turbo. So Tord Reklev takes game number 1 here against Grant, getting closer to that 4th.
Orders in a nice spot there for Tord, 1 Archeops as well, so overall these are some pretty solid prize cards to work with.
Yeah, both players having some very solid prize cards, as you mentioned. They're not anything game-changing, nothing crucial is there for either player, so they should be able to play this game very smoothly with all their options available to do whatever they're intending on doing. Now we are going to see Grant start us off with this Battle VIP pass off the concealed cards from Radiant Greninja.
Yeah, it looks like we got a little head start here. Grant Manley getting some cards placed into the discard pile. Looks like the escape rope was potentially used there, and the Battle VIP pass is found and played. Going to grab the additional Comfey and of course the Cramorant, which loves to get an early attack off. Gonna have to wait until next turn, but certainly would love to flood the Lost Zone here in this opening turn.
During round 9, I did see Grant pull off a turn to Sableye attack with 10 cards in the Lost Zone. So that would be very impressive to see here. But unfortunately, Tord's Pokemon just have a little too much HP, even for Sableye to be useful that early on. But 10 cards in Lost Zone means Grant will have seen a lot of cards, gone through a lot of cards in the deck, and perhaps gotten close to that Kyogre play in case Manaphy isn't perfectly timed.
Well, easy flower selecting there. Pokestop going away. Colress's Experiment added to the hand, it looked like, and that is a capture energy to continue to take some cards out of the deck here. We see the Oranguru placed, and that always means that you can help yourself out for next turn. Place a card that you'd love to see later on the top of your deck, and maybe when you're not playing a card like that, Colress's Experiment this turn, you can just leave that for next turn.
I want to note how Grant immediately attaches the capture, immediately searches for the Oranguru, so this shows that he's really planning ahead, you know? He's not playing a card, playing the capture energy, and then thinking, what is he going to grab from the capture energy? He already knows exactly what he's thinking to grab. He already goes for it. There's a lot of fluidity in his play, and I really, really like that.
Yeah, once you've played against Lugia, probably 12 times so far over the weekend, it starts to feel like muscle memory at this point. But we'll see if Tord has anything to say about that. The capture energy to start things off here already has the Lugia to start in the active spot, and going to take a look at the cards in the deck so far, just get an understanding of what these prizes are. I'm probably going to be excited to see that nothing too bad is missing.
Indeed, putting the Oranguru at the very top. He will make note, as you mentioned, that Stoutland is there, Manaphy is there as well, and Tord, I feel he already has 2 Lugias in his hand already, so that means he doesn't have to worry about finding another one. That's why we're going for the Oranguru, to make sure that we can maximize the value that Arceus gets with the Primal Turbo. But there was a universe where if Tord somehow didn't get a second Lugia down, and Grant got to the 7 cards in the Lost Zone and activated Mirage Gate to KO with Raikou, that could have been very problematic.
Yeah, you don't often think about the Mirage Gate aggression that this deck can bring, but it definitely is an opportunity there for Grant to get very aggressive.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure Tord will factor that into the potential plays that Grant has, but there is a possibility that Tord could underestimate Grant's hand and Grant's reach into how many cards he could get in the loss zone. So in order to not clog up his bench, he could choose to not bench that second Lugia, but I think Tord will want to play it extra safe.
I think we see 2 Lugia in the hand, so safety is his middle name.
Yeah, safety and that beautiful starting hand, like that's just the way he immediately drew the hand. I'm sure a lot of players we've seen struggle to get even one Lugia to start them off, and Tor just has 3 of them and the capture energy just in case.
Well, maybe we need to have another conversation with Isaiah Bradner about consistency.
Indeed, because their group was playing 3 Lugias, right, and only 2 captures, so that's 3 less cards that will fetch you Lugia on turn 1.
Yep, we do see Tord making use of that Oranguru play once more, where you take one of those special energy cards in the hand, place that back into the deck, and then find a shuffling effect using the Evolution Incense to do just that, and hopefully making this top deck a little more live in the future.
There's a second Lugia being benched, playing extra safe. Make sure that even if Grant was able to pull this off, he wouldn't be able to threaten towards single Lugia. And we do see the research. I honestly hadn't realized that after all of this, Tord had not played a supporter yet, gets the 2 Arceus in the discard pile, and gets a fresh hand to work with.
Yeah, I know players are high-fiving for Professor's research with no cards on the discard, but if it's 2 Archeops, that's a double high-five at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Double Arceus is what you want to see on turn 1 in your discard pile. Tord will also be able to use Read the Wind to get a further 3 cards into his hand. Debating on whether the Choice Belt, which is fairly useless at this point, is the card to give up on, and that's exactly what we see.
Yep, not serving Tord very well there. Often the knockout is fairly simple on the Raikou V, so not going to have to need that. And Grant now has that Colress's Experiment, as we saw from last turn. Is this decision going to be difficult? We see 3 energy in the choice, so we saw a few of these were able to be tossed away earlier on.
Yeah, 3 energy, a Sableye, and the follow-up Colress, so definitely a tough decision here. It sends that Sableye to the Lost Zone, which he does play a second copy, and Sableye's damage is not as impactful as you would like it to be in this matchup because the Pokemon just have so much HP from Tord.
Well, here comes the Wiggles as Grant tries to figure out what is going on here with the flower selecting. And it looks like a Colress's Experiment is going to be dropped. So whatever that other card was pretty good.
It was Clara, so Clara being valued a lot in order to be able to get that Raikou back at some point, get your attackers. Raikou is the Pokemon that Grant is relying on a lot, but he might not know that Tord is playing that Dunsparce. So whenever Tord decides to bench that, when he feels that he needs to trade perfectly well with the Raikou, how does Grant deal with a big Lugia here?
Yeah, we've noticed that the high hit point Pokemon for Grant has been pretty difficult. It is a possibility to, of course, reach the knockout on the Stoutland as we saw last game. But if you're protecting the weakness of a Lugia VSTAR, that's almost impossible to knock out in one turn.
Yeah, with no weakness, no bench damage, that Lugia becomes a very big wall to go through for Grant. And even though Raikou does do a lot of damage, it does cap out at 220 with 2 filled benches, and that is 60 short from knocking out the Lugia.
Lost Zone has reached 6 so far, so 1 more to activate the Mirage Gate. When you see this Convey come down, that probably means that Scoop Up Net eventually will be played this turn. You don't want to leave the bench completely filled with all of these cards that aren't really meant to be taking knockouts. Of course, the Cramorant could start to see some play, but there's a lot of other stronger cards.
Now, Grant seems to be missing that lightning energy, so he will need to use another flower selecting in order to activate the Mirage Gate. He's also eyeing up that escape rope indeed, and see what Tord commit to before choosing his own next play. There's a lot of mind games going on here. Tord must be thinking, does he have the Raikou? Can he actually knock out my Lugia this turn? Or can I just give up on the Oranguru?
Yeah, the energy placement of the capture energy, especially onto the active and then seeing the escape rope, certainly makes you think, well, there's got to be at least a scoop up net or something going on here. So whatever Pokemon will be promoted is likely not the Pokemon that Tord would see at the end of the turn. It looks like with all that information in mind, gonna just go ahead and leave the Lugia up.
And as you mentioned, that capture energy placement was pretty key. Could have given Tord a false sense of security. Now we know he does have the option for Raikou, but Grant's bench is full. He also had a very tough flower selecting, having to choose between the second Sableye and the Ordinary Rod. But Grant has a scoop up net to open up the bench space. He does find the switching card. That might have been the card that Grant needed in order to be able to take this KO with Raikou right here.
Yeah, these 7 cards in the Lost Zone now could potentially open up some plays here. It is certainly tricky here, but we are going to see that scoop up net played. Opening up the bench space, Grant just wants to make sure that no step is missed, and there is the Raikou along with the Mirage Gate.
Indeed, this pause that we had was Grant figuring exactly what he needed to do, in what order he needed to do, and once he was sure of exactly what he was doing, now we see the cards just going down a lot more fluid, although hesitating a little bit with the combination of energies, debating probably between the Psychic and the Water, as we see, choosing the Psychic, valuing the Water a lot more to be able to be attached into the Kyogre in case there's no access for Manaphy eventually when he decides to attack with it.
Yeah, also could be a nod to the fact that this Raikou could be knocked out soon, and you want to know where that Psychic energy is, and having access to that by way of the Clara that was saved later on means that maybe you get an additional Sableye attack that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, Grant really put a lot of value into that Clara and into that Sableye, knowing that's his best way to remove a potential Dunsparce from play or remove a potential Manaphy from play. And there's the first KO.
Yeah, the double prize knockout there on the Lugia V, of course. And that means that Stoutland is probably not going to be a great card here for Tord, unless he has a lot of resources to overextend past the Raikou. I think you almost want to just deal with the threat at this point, however.
Yeah, absolutely. The way to use Stoutland would have to be through a boss's orders, and that will leave the Raikou available. And with the size of the bench that that Grant currently has, and that Tord will have after using Summoning Star, then that Raikou could be a very easy response to the Stoutland. So Tord really needs to deal with this Raikou, and combining that KO with a Marnie, I think, would be his best possible play right here.
Looks like we also see the Dunsparce in hand, so that adds to the levels here as Tord has to make the decision of if I do Marnie, is that going to be enough to prevent the Raikou from coming back? I mean, it's really just a Clara away from revisiting here, and with a Mirage Gate as well. So perhaps the Dunsparce does need to be played on a turn like this, even though that does open up some avenues for Sableye to start to get aggressive, as we see that the Lost Zone is at 7 and 3 isn't too far to reach.
Exactly, and there's also a lot of mind games happening here, because even though the Marnie does deny a lot of resources from Grant, he does have a bunch of cards in his hand. It actually, because these decks don't play any shuffle draw or any way to find cards, then you don't know if that Marnie is taking away the key card or actually getting Grant closer to it.
Yeah, that's a great point. We also see this collapsed stadium, which could be a little bit awkward here. Going to reduce the damage that a Raikou would be able to deal anyways if it were to come back, and also just removing one of those Comfeys. We've seen that when a Marnie is played, sometimes you have to use multiple switching effects between 2 Comfeys, and if you only have one, that leads to maybe having to rely a little more on the Radiant Greninja than you'd like, or the Oranguru.
Yeah, that collapsed stadium can be pretty detrimental to Grant at any given point, but that Comfey is usually going to be the target for him to discard. You do have access to a lot of Comfeys at this point, even though you do want to go through your deck pretty quickly. That's not the biggest priority. Grant's biggest priority right now is to be able to respond effectively to this Lugia, and what he needs is a way to recover it, the Raikou, and a way to power it up.
Looks like we are going to see the evolution in sense of grabbing an additional card here, the Lugia VSTAR. No real way to play that just yet, so have to assume that this is leading into some thinning for a Marnie that could be happening pretty shortly. Tord is still going to have to make that decision on if the Dunsparce is impactful or if he can forego this.
Yeah, the big thing with the Reklev Stadium and the Dunsparce is that if Grant somehow did have a way to take down that Lugia, then Tord wouldn't immediately have an answer to whatever Grant did use. That means Tord would have to find either one of the capture energies, one of the quick balls, or one of the ultra balls to find his next attacker, unless he chose to use an Arceus, which would contain a risk in and of itself.
Tord deciding to value the quick ball here, going to leave that on the top of the deck before the Marnie. And we've spoken so often about this, players just wanting to have as many options as possible. Leaving that opportunity to search for whatever, even if it is the Dunsparce at some point. Don't put the Dunsparce there. Go ahead and just leave a quick ball, and you'll be able to find that, or potentially a different attacker if your avenue to victory does change.
Exactly. As long as that quick ball is a quick ball, that means it can become Dunsparce or it can become an attacker. Once that quick ball does get played, then you can no longer choose, and you don't know exactly how Grant is going to respond to this, but you do know that you are knocking out the lightning Pokemon right now, and you see at the very top of the Lost Zone an Ordinary Rod, which is one of the ways that Grant could recover that card. So Tord more preoccupied with the bench space, with setting up another attacker as a follow-up of the capture energy, or no, perhaps he just wants to keep that bench space open for now.
We see the Archeop's going to be the recipient of that capture energy. Could lead into a Speed Wing at some point. We've seen that as a attacker against some of these one prize Pokemon, but also just having that retreat option available and knowing that if you did want to extend with multiple energies from Primal Turbo, you have the ability to do just that as you already have a retreater established.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to pivot into the right attacker, as you say, right, Kyle? Sorry. We're going to see Grant promote this Comfey, start using flower selecting, see what choices he gets, hopefully an easier one, but not exactly the lightning energy. He does have access to the other one, but it does give him a little bit of a pause.
Yeah. Grant thinks he might need the Manaphy. we know that it's not necessarily the best card here.
Yeah, Grant still without the full confirmation that Tord does not, in fact, have a Raikou in his deck list. I thought I had missed it myself, but seems like Tord did mention at some point that you have to choose between Stoutland or Raikou, and we've seen a lot of players with Raikou. I feel like the majority probably had the Raikou, but that is not the case for Tord.
Well, the second energy onto the Comfey, but no worries there. It finds the Raikou off of that Ordinary Rod, and the Mirage Gate is ready to go. The energies as well. We see the water and the lightning attached there, and that means that Raikou is ready to Lightning Rontu one more time, and the Dunsparce not being played could be pretty impactful now.
Yeah, Tord maybe underestimating the potential of Grant's deck and the reach it has. Seeing that Ordinary Rod at the top of the Lost Zone might have given him a little bit of a false sense of security. Tord did have the Dunsparce in his hand, also kept the Quick Ball after the Marnie, and also attached the Capture Energy. So that was 3 instances where Tord could have chosen to bench the Dunsparce, but he did not.
Yeah, we see the fleet-footed synergizes very well with this deck. Just keep drawing cards. Try to thin the deck down as much as possible. Eventually, you can leave yourself with an opportunity where your deck is just energy cards, and you can perform some pretty incredible attacks like that Aqua Storm. But we're not focused on that right now. Lightning Rondo taking a big knockout here. 2 more prize cards for Grant Manley as he leads the prize exchange here in game number 2 in the top 4.
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna be leaving Sao Paulo without seeing that Aqua Storm at all live on Twitch, which makes me very sad. But now we're gonna see how Tord responds to this. Yeah, I figured the Yveltal or the Charizard could be the responses here. Has access to both, I believe, but it's gonna come down to Tord knocks out this Raikou, puts himself at 2 prizes. If Grant is able to utilize Sableye, to pick off that Oranguru or uses Cramorant to take out the Yveltal. He'll be at 1 prize card, and Tord will need to utilize the Stoutland in order to close out this match.
Yeah, that's a great point. Still has plenty of reach. We are going to see a lot of those energies, however, likely being committed here to the Yveltal to take a big knockout. And that leads into this energy attachment from the previous turn. Just having the retreat available means that you can start to think about Pokemon that would require 5 energy cost attack.
Indeed. And I can't really tell from this angle if Grant has, or how many cards he has left, but if Tord once again underestimates the potential of Grant's deck or the reach of Grant's deck and doesn't protect his bench with the mana fee, that could lead to Grant closing out the game with Aquastorm.
That's what I'm waiting for. It's getting closer as we see that there are 2 targets that would only require 3 energies, I believe, to be discarded in that way to close out the game here. So maybe we will see something found off this quick ball to help in an instance like that.
Yeah, this is where the quick ball will show its value. That 1 card that Tord kept around for that Marnie, but I think he's still in a little bit of trouble now. Grant could, like I said, target down the mana feed, target down the Sableye with the Oranguru, sorry, with Sableye, and it's on Tord to find the Stoutland and power it up enough to take the KO.
Looks like Tord has done his job at this point, making sure to preserve the powerful energies as best as possible, using all of these other energies to take the knockout here and stay in the prize exchange. Should be a 2-2 prize game here in game number 2, and Tord did a great job of making this only 1 prize available for Grant on this turn. Tord will have at least 1 more turn to figure things out, and Stoutland lines up very well with that.
Yeah, Stoutland is certainly the Pokemon that Tord is eyeing up. We know Grant does not have any way to attack Tord's hand, and he is holding both the Stoutland and the Boss's Order. So even if Grant figured out that Stoutland was a threat and somehow managed to power up Raikou for a 3rd turn in a row in order to have the highest HP Pokemon available, then putting Stoutland out of use, Tord could still use Radiant Charizard to take the final KO, or could simply go Boss plus Stoutland. So Tord having all these options in hand, and I don't think Grant can do anything about it.
Yeah, Grant basically has this opportunity to just remove the Yveltal from play. We see the Cramorant can, of course, just take the knockout there with Spit innocently at this stage, but Tord, if he has all of the cards available, should be able to find the Stoutland, and just 1 gusting effect really would be able to avoid this if all 4 powerful energies weren't available. I am curious to see if Tord has the reach.
Yeah, I have to wonder. The big thing, I think, could be retreating for Tord if he has an energy in his hand to attach to the Arceus. I do believe I see an Aurora energy right there, and that would be enough to access all 4 powerful and power up Stoutland to not even need the boss and just take down this Cramorant.
Grant fluttered the discard pile for us. I don't believe I saw a powerful energy in the discard pile for Tord, so that is pretty incredible that we've gotten to this stage of the game, and we have not seen that.
I know. What are the chances for that? Now, Grant's still figuring out exactly what he wants to do this turn. He has a bunch of options, though the Cramorant seems to be the most likely one. He does have the Clara, he does have Mirage Gate, he does have a bunch of options, but the question is, are any of those good enough?
We will have to see. So many choices here, but which one gets you closer to victory? The real route that we saw was basically closed down by that mana fee. It's another perfect timing there from Tord. Last time it was a little easier as the prize cards told you when to play the mana fee, and sure enough, found the great time to play it down here.
Before Grant benched that Snorlax, I was thinking maybe he could try to use Sableye, ping 2 different Pokemon without KOing them, and then using Sableye once again to close out that game, because the Collapse Stadium would prevent Tord from benching a Stoutland. However, now that we see the Snorlax getting powered up, the Snorlax is the heftiest Pokemon that's not worth 2 prizes that Grant does have in order to prevent the Stoutland from taking a KO. But we know that Tord is holding that boss's orders.
Yep, Grant just playing to his outs at this point, trying to find a way to stick around and avoid being knocked out by a card like that Stoutland. You see that he's holding on to the Lost Vacuum, which could have been a way to maybe mess around with the Collapse Stadium, but I think that's potentially hindering Tord a little more than Grant at this stage.
Wondering now why Grant promoted the Cramorant, as we do see a Val VIP pass off the top. If he had been able to promote that Comfey, he would be able to flower selecting this this turn and retreat into the Snorlax with the Clara, finding that last energy to attack with Snorlax. But now if he commits the energy attachment from Clara onto the active to retreat, then the Snorlax will not be able to attack.
Looks like Grant just looking to take the risk here in this spot, or maybe we did miss one of those powerful energies.
Yeah, maybe Tord doesn't have access to all those powerful energies that he would like. We're trying to figure that out right now, but I really wonder what is Grant's plan here. It was not the Snorlax, it wasn't the Sableye, it wasn't the Raikou. He can't attack with any of them now, so we'll have to see what he ends up doing.
Yeah, the Sableye play seemed to line up fairly nicely, but this is just going to be a knockout with Spit innocently on with the Cramorant there. Grant going down to just one prize card. Tord looking to eye up two. We see the Stoutland V coming down into play. Powerful energy being rotated to the top of the hand. Archeop's going to go ahead and look through the deck with the Primal Turbo. Looks like we see the two powerful energies there. Is the rest in there? It looks like we do see number 4. So it looks like we should just have to, yeah, that's going to be just about it there. We see the powerful energy and the boss's orders. That's going to be enough here to close things out against Grant Manley. Just going to show how this was done. This could easily be finished with the Rangaroo, and sure enough, Tord Reklev going to be closing things out here in the final match we have here of day number 2. Moving on to the championships here in Latin America.
Indeed, congratulations to Tord, congratulations to Grant as well. He put up quite the fight, but having no hand disruption in his deck ended up being fatal for him. He couldn't have a way to stop Tord from